arena, as I think you've all learned from what you've seen thus far. And give me a second. A little bit confused as to why everyone can see. Strange. We are recording the session now, and as I think everyone knows, I'll spend about a minute and a half running through very quickly what StarWeaver does for a living, and then jump it over to Kevin so he can run this program the way he's been doing before. So again, my name is Paul Siegel. This is the third part of the Cybersecurity Warrior Certification Program. It is being facilitated by Kevin Cardwell, who I think is known to you so far. If not, this is the first time you'll get to learn really more about, in this case, essential defensive strategies. StarWeaver is an education company that focuses on technology, project management, and finance training. We deal with a lot of organizations around the world. That is major institutions in the finance, technology, project management, wholesale, retail, healthcare sectors. We cover 5 major areas: cutting-edge IT, traditional enterprise IT, project management, finance, banking, and business skills, most of which is delivered live and online, but we also have a large library of courses, and all is driven by people like Kevin, who are practitioners, hands-on professionals who know how to answer questions that are related to the real world that you will all face as you leave this program. And so what it means is we can deliver content in multiple formats, including this kind of format you're experiencing now, as well as the recorded format that you see. The StarWeaver Institute programs through which most of you probably registered for this program is, in this case, the Cybersecurity Warrior, but there's a capital market immersion, there's Scrum, and there's a few others that are being launched. They're hands-on, they're practical, and in this case, a 7-part program with about an hour for each. You'll have lots of questions and answers time. There'll be a short test at the very end of the program made available to you. It's 25 questions. It'll come from the materials. So if you've reviewed the materials, if you've listened, if you've paid attention, taken notes, you're going to pass. You'll get a few chances to do that, 3 chances precisely, and if you don't at that point, we'll have to wait a month, and then you'll be able to take it. But nevertheless, you'll get a issued certificate at no cost to you. Given the world we live in today, it's quite valuable to know a lot about this subject, and I think we all experience it from the subjects you've seen covered here, and there are the 7. We're on the 3rd one, which is explaining and applying the essential cybersecurity defense strategies. Again, this is today, the 14th. You'll see the others up here. If you're uncertain, go to our website, starweaver.com/events, and they're all listed there. Kevin, again, is an expert in this field. He'll take it over from here. If you have any questions, just let us know. And again, chat on the right side there. Here are the courses that you can get access to. I'm jumping through this quickly because I think many of you have already seen this, but click on the link in the right window and you'll be able to give us some feedback and get a free course. If you have any questions, contact us with the emails here or go to helpdesk@starweaver.com. And with that, I will pass it over to Kevin and wish you all a great program. And again, this is being recorded for your benefit and review later on. Kevin, take it away. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my actual screen now. Can you see my PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so essential defensive strategies. I created this because we can defend, and that's kind of what I want to do here is talk about fundamentals of defense. But first, let's talk about what we're up against. So the biggest thing we're up against is too much information, and we're going to cover too much information, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah, play on the Clint Eastwood movie, and then smart defense. What you can do to actually protect your organization, and it's actually not as difficult as some people make it out to be. Okay, so the problem is this: anything that's ever on the internet stays on the internet. I think most of you know that. This is a website, tryfinite.org. It was out of Germany. It was the first group that did all the Bluetooth hacking. So this is on the actual web in this Wayback Machine here, this archive that has 284 billion pages to date as of today. And this is actual copies of this entire website. So if you go back into those 2007, 2008, all that type of thing, you'll find actually all the tools when they initially released all these hacks against Bluetooth. And that's what we're up against. So anytime you put your websites online, they're copied. So don't think just because you remove something that nobody can access it. We used a lot of, in the hacking side, different types of steganography tools and things like that. You can't find them anymore on the internet in the known websites, but you can go to this archive.org, the Wayback Machine, and then you have access to every one of them. So again, this is the type of thing you're dealing with. All your information's out there on the internet. So you need to check and make sure that you're aware of that, and you look for things that you think might have went away, they're still around. But the danger are these sites like this, Shodan.io. Now Shodan is actually a massive crawler that crawls through the entire actual internet looking for different things. So as you see here, I've got a tag of SCADA. So actually supervised control and data acquisition systems, so industrial control systems. And what I had specifically here was PLC S7. For those who don't know, PLC S7 was actually the actual programmable logic controller that was attacked by Stuxnet. So I'm showing you right there that we have these capability. I can search and find all these that are publicly facing the internet. Now in reality, none of these should be facing the internet, but we know reality is not always the case. So again, these are the problems you've got. So what happens is, when we do this search from the attacker's point of view, we start seeing things like this. Local area network protocols. It should never be open from the internet. Ports 135, 137, 139, and 445. I should never see those from the internet because they're just used to do local area network or LAN protocol communication. That means it's internal, right? So this is what one looks like right here. I tried to obfuscate it best I can. It's in Tallahassee, Florida. As you see here, from the internet search, it's telling me it's a SCADA type of system, the server name. So I've got CSU, and I've got SCADA, and I've got the MAC address. But even more than that, I have the actual fact that it's a work group. Now those of you who are watching probably remember your Windows. The way Windows works is you've got a net bias name. That's that CSU underscore SCADA, and then you got a work group or a domain name. Well, by default, the domain name is work group. You're in a work group. So as you can see, this is a standalone server on a SCADA control network that is facing the internet. Now why this is there, I have no idea. I can't tell you why somebody would leave this information there. But this is what I want you to understand. This is what we're up against. But some of this is basic stuff to prevent, and that's what we're going to talk about. So this one really makes no sense, because if you remember again, server name SCADA, and then the MAC address, and then here MS Home. MS Home is a home type of system. So it's bad enough that you have a Windows system facing the internet, but it's even much more worse that you have a Windows system facing the internet that is actually a home version of Windows. It's not even a commercial or entity that's set up for discretionary access control or anything else. So when you look here and you see this, what we call the 16th byte, this thing I'm pointing here, this 1E, hex of 0, hex 1D. If you find a 1C here, you find a domain controller. So all this information is leaked to the internet. So you have to make sure that you do good diligence. And the diligence is, and we'll cover that, you don't allow net bias ports from the internet. Now I said 135, 137, 139, and 445. The big one being 445. So when you look at Internet Storm Center, look at this. In purple is port 445. This is a major concern because that purple port 445 means that's a net bias port. That should never be allowed from the internet. But look over here in North America, how much purple we have. These are actual internet probes of port 445 and finding that the port's open. And remember, we only use that port for local area network protocol. So we're allowing access to the local area network protocol from the internet or from the globe. That just makes no sense from a security standpoint. So that's why I started talking about defense. And then Australia is really bad for port 445, right? Europe is a little bit better here, right? Those types of things. So again, those are the types of things you want to look at. So when you start looking at the attack surface, and this is what I'm going at here when I'm talking about the attack surface. As an attacker, I'm trying to find the easiest way to attack you. I do that by discovering your attack surface and then determining which part of your attack surface is going to allow me the best vector of attack. And I usually go for the most of one that's going to give me the highest privileges. Now the other port I want to point out here is 3389. Remote desktop protocol. We're getting more and more of you that are having to set up this actual remote access, and you're setting a remote desktop protocol. So hackers know that. So they're scanning for RDP, and we've had some vulnerabilities in RDP. So we'll talk about some of these different things. But in defense, when we switch our hat here in a few slides, in defense, our job is to reduce our attack surface and make it as much difficult as we can so the attacker hopefully will target somebody else. That's our goal when we do this. Now, it's not all bad. I mean, when you think about it, if you've played with some of the latest versions of Windows, that type of stuff, we've gotten better at security. That's a good thing. The problem is the hackers have gotten better at hacking. And we just passed the second Tuesday of the month. Most of you listening out there know the second Tuesday of the month is Microsoft Patch Tuesday. And of course, we always reel and we get a bunch of patches out. And if you patch them within 24 hours, great on you. Because in the hacking world, we call that Wednesday, Exploit Wednesday, the day after Patch Tuesday. Because now we have all these vulnerabilities out there. We can actually write exploits for them because we know people are not going to patch within 24 hours. Why is this? Our patch system's broken. The challenge is it's all we have. It's the best we have, but we got to wait for a patch. So right now, between now and next Patch Tuesday, there's all these vulnerabilities that are known about by some people, and publicly known is hard to define nowadays, but it's not known about by everybody until Microsoft releases it on Patch Tuesday. But up until Patch Tuesday, people could be using that against you. And after Patch Tuesday, being viewed again, because you can't patch within 24 hours in most enterprise architectures. So we have to do patching, and we're going to talk, that's one of our controls. But understand it's a broken system. You're always going to patch, but there's 0 days, which is a vulnerability is out there before ever a patch is released, and we'll cover and show one of those in a little bit, right? So this is the challenge you've got. And you got another thing called residual risk. And residual risk is there's always going to be, when you're connected, residual risk that something's going to happen. So no matter how good you do your protections, there's a chance that with residual risk, I'm going to be able to hack you. And that's the reality of being on the internet. If you don't want to accept that risk, then you do what? You unplug from the internet. All right, but then you got your phone, and most of you use your phone, and you're under residual risk from that as well. Okay, now this site is why I say there's residual risk. www.zerodayinitiative.com. And exactly what it says, 0 days. These are finding 0-day vulnerabilities, notifying the vendors, which is good. It's a responsible disclosure site, and telling people these are the weaknesses, these are all the problems we see in this vulnerability landscape. So when we look at it, we go here. So when you start looking here, some of you might know Trend Micro. I don't know. I don't know what audience I have out there, but you could even be Trend Micro. But it's not a good thing when Trend Micro, which is a type of antivirus protection type system we like to use, has all these vulnerabilities, and the CVSS, Common Vulnerability Scoring Severity, is a 9. The highest is a 10. But the scary thing is they were notified about it 35 days ago. Down here 38 days ago, and it's all CVSS 9. So what that means is we have, and now these are the release dates that they've come out if they haven't patched them, right, as 0 days, unless they get an extension. We'll show one of those in a moment. So we have all these vulnerabilities in Trend Micro. And I mean, we're not just saying it's Trend Micro, it's everybody. This is the thing. Some people try to see, okay, okay, somebody's telling me you're seeing the actual presenter screen type of thing. All right, so let me take care of that right now. Sorry about that, but thanks for letting me know. Now you should just be seeing the actual, let me do this. There, that should make it better for you. So there, okay, turn micro. So now you've got the 9. Now here you've got Oracle, 139 days. Look at that. Anybody running Oracle out there? Could be a Java vulnerability. But Oracle 7.5, that's still a high. We don't consider that a critical alert unless it's above like an 8 nowadays. And then you got Apple. So some people say, well, Apple's protected. But if you see, you've got Apple in here at 4.9 and 6.2, right? Different types of things. So again, those are what you actually want to be able to see, is what systems you're running. You have to track these vulnerabilities, and that's part of your essential defensive strategies we're going to continue to discuss. Okay, so now what we have Schneider Electric. Now the reason I put Schneider Electric up here, some of you might know Schneider Electric is very popular in industrial control systems and those types of things. So when you look at Schneider Electric, what do you see? You see Schneider Electric has had 300 days to patch a vulnerability that's the highest rated severity we can give, which is critical. And in that 300 days, they still have not patched this vulnerability. That's a concern, and that's why I continue to tell you the patch system's broken. There's always that chance that it's actually, when it's broken, you're going to get hit by a vulnerability. So again, those types of things are what we want to actually do. Okay, so now the bad. Alien Vault. Anybody use Alien Vault? Alien Vault's a SIM, and again, I'm not picking on any one vendor. All vendors have vulnerabilities, but this is a CVSS of a 10. Common vulnerability score and severity of a 10. That means this vulnerability is the most critical vulnerability we have, and it's a unified security management platform. All right, so it's actually something we use to protect our environment as far as monitoring and those types of things. But it has an SQL injection vulnerability, and this one gets me a little bit, upset, because we showed people how to protect from SQL injection in 2006. So why are we still seeing these SQL injection remote code execution vulnerabilities? These are the types of things that are going to always get us in trouble, because there's always a chance that remote code execution is definitely going to be possible. So we're always concerned about that. Here's the ugly. This is Google Chrome. All right, some of you might be using Chrome as you're watching this. This was a 0-day vulnerability against Google Chrome. Now remember, the 0-day initiative is a responsible disclosure site, but even though they're a responsible disclosure site, they give the vendor a certain amount of time and extensions and everything else, but eventually they're going to release it because either the vendor's not fixing it or they're not going to patch it, so they want the public to know about it so you can make a decision. So when you look at this 0-day vulnerability, 6.8, so right at the high, right at the high cutoff of a 7. Right, it's not as bad, but what you want to look at right here, allows remote attackers to bypass restrictions on Google Chrome. User interaction is required to exploit this vulnerability, and that's kind of where people say, well, it's not that bad because user interaction is required. But come on, folks, everybody knows people click, right? That's why ransomware and all that stuff is so prevalent today. So when you look here, you see the target must visit a malicious page. So again, it's a click. Somebody clicking here, and we know that that's easy enough vector with social engineering and those types of things. And the really ugly about this is here. Here's where the entire thing happens. March 17th, 2016, it's disclosed to the vendor. They acknowledge it, then they actually give an extension on June 30th. So from March 17th to June 30th, the vendor has all that time, doesn't do anything. So 0-day initiative gives them extension. And then August 25th, they notify the vendor the intent to publish the report as a 0-day. Why? Because they can't wait forever. So finally, the vendor decides they're not going to patch it. And that's here. Given the stated purpose Google Chrome and the nature of the vulnerability, the only mitigation strategy is to restrict interaction with the application to trusted sites. So yeah, if you can control every site you go to is trusted, then yeah, this vulnerability is mitigated. But again, can you do that with every user? And you look here in the red box, March, it was disclosed, and September 21st, 6 months later, a little over 6 months later, it was released as a 0-day vulnerability. So these are the types of things that we have to deal with. And unfortunately, this is reality. And it's the reality today because software is so complex and we have so many vulnerabilities, we continue to find these vulnerabilities all the time. So some of you might feel like a rope's about to break, or you're at the end of your rope, or you're hanging out on this thing, hanging out here just as an administrator, fighting fires, as we used to say in the military. But again, the reason I started after 25 years of doing offense and doing all the pen testing presentations and all those types of things, I said, you know what? Let's research this further. So I created a Capture the Flag contest at DEF CON, Hacker Halted, and a few other places several years ago. And I put just basic fundamentals of defense on these networks and discovered that the majority of everything we've been looking at, most people don't know how to get through it if you do just fundamental defensive controls. And in fact, this is the thing they try to do. So we got this breach index, right? So this is the first half of 2016, breaches by severity. And you see a category 1 breach, which is low level, and a category 5 breach. There's only 7 what we considered a severe category 5 type of breach, right? So everybody tells you all the time the compromise is inevitable. I hear this all the time by the vendors when they try to explain to us they were hacked, but the hackers, they were just too good. Why were they good? Because they had the advanced persistent threat, they were sophisticated, et cetera, et cetera. The data doesn't bear this out. When you look at this report and you look at the category of the breaches, the majority of these breaches are not that sophisticated. Okay, so I tell everybody this is a myth, and I've been telling them it for a long time. Even though I'm on the offensive side and I get, a lot of consulting engagements and those types of things for penetration testing, which is great, we can defend. We can actually raise the bar of the person's knowledge that's able to attack us. We can raise that bar by just putting in good fundamentals of security controls. Okay, so the other thing everybody's going to convince you is the insider threat's this biggest threat. Again, it doesn't bear out with the latest numbers. If you look for this 3-year report, 2014 through 2016, you look here and where's the insider at? Most of it's accidental loss, and the insiders are down here. They're all the way down here at the bottom of the actual number of breaches. So yes, insider threats extremely dangerous because they're already on the inside. And in most cases, it can be a disgruntled employer, right? Employee, me disgruntled type people. It can be somebody who's wanting to get back at the company, and they're already inside the perimeter. So that's usually a big concern. But these breaches that you hear about in the news all the time doesn't bear that out as much as some people might think it does. So that's why I like putting this chart up there to show you that the biggest threat is still the malicious outsider, which is down in here, right? This is the malicious outsider here, still that outsider external threat. So when people like the Jericho Forum and other people try to tell you that the insider threat is it and the perimeter security is dead, they're not being honest with you. And the best analogy I like to use is, we all know you can have an alarm on your car. Does that mean nobody can steal your car? No, but if you have the alarm enabled, hopefully they'll look for another car. What about, do you leave your door unlocked on your car and leave your key in the ignition? I hope not. If you do that, that's equivalent to saying, well, we don't need perimeter security, so let's just leave the filters open and allow everything in. That's the wrong way to approach this, and that's why malware has proliferated, because people are not doing good fundamentals of defense or essential defensive strategies. All right, so these top 4 controls originally came from the Office of Signals Directive out of Australia, and then it was created into top 20 critical security controls by the SANS Institute, and there's other ones out by NIST and all those types of things. But I like to focus just on these 4 because they were the originals, and they came out and they estimated that 85% of the attacks that we heard about in the news, all that type of stuff, would be blocked when these top 4 controls are applied. Now, application whitelisting was the one that was kind of a little bit different for most people, because you have app blocker capability on Windows, you have commercial products, and now with Windows 10 we have device guard. So these are things you might want to look in. But this one, patch applications, we've already talked about. We know we need to patch applications, but we have a broken system. We have patched the operating system. Yeah, great, patch the operating system, but again, it's a broken system. But this one here, so 2 of the 4 are definitely ones that we know we need to deploy. We always deploy patching and stuff as we can, but there's going to be risk, and we'll identify what to do with that in a moment. But the application whitelisting and minimizing the number of users with privileged rights. We don't need anybody surfing the internet as an administrator and an administrator account. You don't need anybody surfing the internet from a server, period. So if that's happening in your organization, make sure they actually restrict and remove that practice. Okay, this is the good one because we've had a lot of point of sales intrusions that have made a lot of the news. So I wanted to show you some of the data from the investigations of those. And the main focus is here, you can't buy a product and fix this problem. And it's great, products help us, they do that, stuff like that. But the process and methodology is the key, right? The process and methodology, you have to have a process in place. Everybody says, well, yeah, but we buy products and monitor and do all that stuff. Well, look at reality. Your top discovery methods for point of sales and intrusions, right there. All external, 99% of the top 5 discovery methods of point of sales intrusions was outside, external. Your network intrusion detection systems were less than 1%. So again, make sure you understand you have to have a whole entire enterprise process and methodology in place, and not just products. It's people, process, then technology. How about the top discovered methods for financially motivated incidents with web application attacks? Because we talk about web application attacks all the time. Again, external discovery of these attacks was 88% of the attacks. And if you hire an outsourced company, 1%. So again, it's be careful what you think you can throw at this problem. Too many people are throwing technology at it without having a process defined. Okay, so I like to tell everybody defense is possible. So now that we've talked about all these different things, hopefully we've given you some data out there. You can do your own research about what these attacks, but 90% of all these attacks that we see can be blocked by good fundamentals of defense or essential defensive strategies, which is what we're going to do here. Vulnerability management. Number one thing is vulnerability management. We just looked at the problem. All these software, all these vendors have vulnerabilities. So you need to know every system software you have in your organization. More importantly, if you're the networking team or you know the networking team, you go to them and say, tell me my ingress and egress requirements for every segment. And that's what I got on this bullet right here. What is my requirements inbound, which is ingress, and egress, which is outbound? Okay, and then you monitor any deviations from that. Because let's face it, we're all fighting the same battle. Big data is here. We got these big giant data lakes of unstructured data. So because we have these giant data lakes, how do we monitor it? Look for deviations from something that shouldn't be there. If you know the outbound of that segment's only supposed to be, say, secure shell and maybe web, anything outside of that, critical alert, because you know something happened, right? But identify the critical segments by your vulnerabilities. If you know you can't patch that software, you can't patch that system, what you do is you put it in its own zone or segment of your network, and then you put the best and increased monitoring capability you can there, because you know that's where your area of critical risk is. And this is how we do it. It's not really anything new. So what I like to tell everybody, it's what we did when we put internet access to ships at sea when I worked on that project. And that was when we put the internet on the ship, we did not put the weapons control systems for the Tomahawk missiles on the same network segment that the internet was on. So why are we doing that today on all these networks? You see all these breaches, all these ransomware breaches. Why is the critical database and information on a publicly accessible network where users can go to an internet, click 3 times, and get locked by ransomware, and a server gets locked by ransomware? How does a server get locked by ransomware unless somebody on that server is going to the internet, which should never be happening? Okay? Research your segment by segment vulnerabilities. Your legacy commercial industrial control systems. If you have to keep the actual system or that software for a business need and you can't patch it, make sure you prioritize those as those critical segments. And you have that actual critical segment that you can protect with the best monitoring you have. And you're actually mitigating the risk of an infection. And we'll talk more about that when we get into what you do if a segment gets compromised or how you can monitor segments in today's networks. Okay, prioritize your fixes. The number one thing I like to tell everybody, Your server's no initiating of a connection. A server should never initiate a connection out to the internet, really initiate a connection to anybody. Server is a server. A server has services that it receives traffic. So since it receives traffic, it should never initiate a connection. If it initiates a connection, well, how do we do that? At the perimeter, whatever device you have, you put in a rule that all server IP addresses, the block of that IP address, so hopefully your servers are in a block of IPs, they usually are, that any send packets from that as a source address is blocked. You just blocked majority of the malware. 90% of the malware will actually phone home with direct queries, stuff like that. So if it gets on a server, that server can't initiate a connection, it can't go out. They got to do a little bit more, which is why the 10% malware will look around and find out the egress path and use what we call egress busting, right? But we'll cover that momentarily. So Windows, if you have Windows in a server environment that's in one of these segments, make sure it's a core installation. It's capabilities there in 2008, 2012, 2016. Don't have any servers there with the Windows environment on it. It's a server. It just needs to serve the services, right? It's the old days of Unix and Linux even. We never ran X Windows on any servers that was in a critical segment. You don't do that. You're just giving more attack surface. Remember, we can't stop vulnerabilities, but what we can do is we can reduce our attack surface. Once you've done this, you track 2 to 3 vulnerability sites. You got ICS, Industrial Control System CERT, right here, the one I'm showing here. You've got a Secunia, you've got the Open Source Vulnerability Database, National Vulnerability Database. You have a lot of different security focus that runs the bug tracks. You have a lot of these different places that you can use for your monitoring. So pick 2 to 3 and you track those and you frequent them once a week or even more. If you got a watch team, security operations center, they should be doing that. And they know what software you have. And you don't read all the noise of all the other alerts you don't need. You tailor the alerts and send them out to your constituents and the people you support. You tailor those alerts just for the ones that the software that you know you run. Most people are going to have Cisco, all that type of stuff. So you always track any vulnerabilities of those because you know what's going to happen. And then you do ingress filtering. And the ingress filtering traffic coming in your network, almost all of you are probably doing some form of it. Security policy determines what's allowed and configured in your filters, all right? And the key is anything coming from the outside should not have an internal address. Well, that's sanity checking. That's a simple one. But also we have this thing called bog-on filtering. A bog-on, it's not nothing new again, but it's a bogey. And a bogey is an address from the internet that usually is never and should never be received as a source. So when you look here, you got some RFCs for it, and you can also actually do the GeoIP blocking. Now the easiest one for this is you should never have a source IP address of the RFC 1918 addresses. The RFC 1918 addresses, the 192.168, the 172.16 to 172.31, and the 10 addresses should never be received from an external location. If it is, there's something wrong there. Somebody did really bad filtering, all right? And then GeoIP blocking. If you don't need to have a country talk to you, block the entire country's IP block. That's what we used to do with the government and the DoD, Department of Defense. We would block the entire country's IP block if it wasn't a country we wanted to be able to send data to us. Now, you can still go to that country and then they just can't initiate connections. So what it is, again, you put in a rule that says this entire IP block, no SYN or synchronized packet coming from that block is allowed in. And in UDP, you should never allow in anyway, but that's another story for another time. Then the last part down here is 64% of the traffic with case studies of malware infection could have been blocked by bog-on filtering. So again, if we do these types of things, we're reducing our attack surface and mitigating our risk. And more importantly, we're raising the bar of the sophistication of the person or the threat that's going to be able to target us. Okay. This is the tough one for people, is egress filtering. Most of you don't do very good egress filtering in all the engagements I've been part of. First thing I do when I get on site for a client, if I'm doing an engagement or I'm visiting them and they want me to do an engagement, I got 3 different VPNs, virtual private networks. I bring it up, and if I can egress out and get my virtual private network connection, that means I just blinded your entire enterprise. So first thing you do is make sure no VPN protocols are egressing out of your organization from the inside, because if it is, anybody inside can be in a virtual private network which is encrypted and you can't look inside it. That's not good, okay? and this is the one that's hard for people. Shut off get access going out to the internet. You don't need 24/7 access from most of your internal segments. And again, when you do that segment by segment design and go through your ingress and your egress requirements, you can identify that. And then what you do is you block the well-known malware ports of communication, web, HTTP, HTTPS, SSH, those types of things. And you look for attempts. Remember, malware does two things. Right? And this is where I get into the disease analogy coming up a little bit later. But malware, when it plants, it's going to phone home. That's that outbound connection. It's planted. It's phoning home, right? If nothing's there, there shouldn't be anybody phoning home. So at security operations centers, if we got people we know that don't work weekends, we have rules that says if traffic's coming out to these well-known malware ports, or really any traffic is trying to go out to an internet address, well, it's probably some type of malware infection. We identify malware infections like that all the time, and then you got to isolate and cut it off, which we'll talk about momentarily. If you're 24/7 and you just can't shut it off, and I know because every time I tell those people, they're like, Kevin, we can't shut off our internet. We're going to leave it on 24/7, which means you have a 24/7 attack vector and attack surface is the way the attacker side looks at it, okay? But then remember when we did our segment by segment analysis for vulnerability management? You do the same thing here, and you only monitor the critical segments. Servers should not initiate connections to the internet. Now, when Swift banking, they'll come up and they'll say, if I got anybody out there they know, well, Swift needs to have their servers be able to initiate connections. If you have to do that, the safest way to do that's a point-to-point leased line. And I know everybody says, well, that costs a lot of money, but it's a bank. If you're a bank, I think it's worth the investment, point-to-point lease line, so your Swift accounts, the endpoints don't get hacked like they've already been done and all that type of stuff, but you know, that's another story. But also, if you can't do a point-to-point lease line, do at least granular. That server can talk to IP to IP, and then you put in some form of strong-based authentication, which even Microsoft, starting with Server 2008, gave us capability. In 2016 has a lot of good types of things we can set up if it's a Windows-to-Windows server communication. So those types of things you're going to have to do. And then subscribe to a service. Damballa, there's other ones out there, and they will tell you if no malware net lookups are coming from your organization. All right, that's your ingress, your egress filter. But there's a better concept called black hole routing. This one is very good because 90% of your malware would do direct queries. So in black hole routing is we only allow DNS traffic sourced from the address of the internal DNS server. If it's not, we block it. So 90% of your malware is going to get on your network and try to phone home. That's that direct query out to DNS if they're using a domain, or a direct point out to 8.8.8.8, the Google DNS. So make sure you block Google DNS queries as well. Don't allow anybody in your organization to do any DNS queries directly. Route them through an internal DNS server that forwards to an external DNS server and out of your network. That blocks 90% of your malware infection communications when they're trying to phone home, right? That's the thing. The other thing you do is the web server. Most of you are running some form of a web server proxy. If you are at the perimeter, don't allow any port 80 or 443 traffic that's not the source IP address of the proxy. Now remember I said 90%. 10% of the stuff out there today will actually go out and figure out your internal address and send it from that. But again, we're 9 out of 10, we're doing pretty good. So that's what we're trying to do. So we need help, right? If you haven't done it already, go research it and install Enhanced Mitigation Experience Toolkit, the EMET Microsoft tool. It adds obstacles to exploitation, protection against applications like Adobe and those types of things. Microsoft's done a very good job with this. And I took all 2015 Internet Explorer, most of them use after free exploits. I took all of them and used EMET, the Enhanced Mitigation Experience Toolkit, to block all those exploits. And even when somebody clicks here, EMET looks at these typical types of exploitation parameters and blocks the attack. Now there's bypasses. If you go read on the internet, you'll find bypasses to EMET, those types of things. But again, we're raising the bar of the threat. Majority of the attacks, remember we go back to our charts, are not that sophisticated. So they're usually not smart enough to build these bypasses, the EMET, and those types of things. So again, it's a good tool. It's not a perfect tool. There's no tool that is perfect out there. But when you put EMET on your system, experiment with it. Those of you out there who have a lab or range environment, do it. Get EMET on your system, start experimenting with how this thing works. It's actually a pretty cool tool to watch. So this is my exam, give you a little quick look at an examination of a secure network architecture. So what we do here is we have the traditional DMZ, which is the actual way, and some people take it off of the Bastion host here. My preferred way is the traditional. And what we do is we just put an intrusion detection system in there as a decoy. And then we take the DMZ and put it off of its own segment. Now there's a couple reasons for this. Performance, but more importantly, it's because of security. So now what we got is all the communication from our internal network that goes out to the internet is on a separate data path from the actual services. So anything services related is on this DMZ network here. So we allow traffic into the services. But this DMZ network, we never allow to initiate a connection. So even if you find this critical segment, we've already talked about how to identify your critical risk. Even if you find a critical vulnerability in here and you exploit it, I don't allow you to come back out. So you can get the exploit, but you're not going to get your shell code to come back out because the egress points are not allowed. This DMZ at this router firewall right here, even in the actual additional Bastion host here, this DMZ source is blocked for a send packet. So anytime something gets impacted in here and exploited, you can't get out. That's secure network architectures, segmentation and isolation. And then you bind all the ports that your inside world needs inside the Bastion host here on the right side of this Bastion host. And then externally, you usually have mail and DNS. So your attack surface is 2 ports to the external threat. Remember the charts when I showed them. The external threat is the biggest concern here. And then what you have is all your DMZ services are all here. You don't need those ports open. If you put the DMZ here, or like Security Plus tells you in here, a separate services subnet, then I got to allow all those ports open to the external network or the internet, which means my attack surface is every service that I allow through. But in this case, my attack surface is only on this segment, which I like to call the decoy DMZ, is here, and the real DMZ is here, and it's only on this segment. So the risk is here. The critical risk is in this DMZ that's off of the data path. And as long as I have good filtering, it doesn't allow that actual traffic to go out. That's the key. So one last thing before we move on here, because I know I'm going to get close on time and I got a couple of demos I want to show, is from the internal network. When the malware infects, first thing it does is phone home. So it phones out to the external network. We've already covered how to deal with that. The second thing it does, I like to use the analogies, it's disease. Like when you get a disease, an infection and a disease, you have what's called patient zero. Well, the same thing with malware. Malware hits the machine, I like to call it patient zero. Okay, our job and the job of the Center of Disease Control is to prevent patient 1 from happening. And the way you do that is you isolate patient 0. Well, how do you do that? Egress out will identify patient 0 one way. The other way patient 0 can be identified is I can look around, because malware does 2 things, remember? First thing it does is phone home. Second thing it does is look around for patient 1. It wants another patient. It wants to infect more machines, right? Those types of things. So we're going to cover how to do that with internal segment by segment decoys and triggers. And that's the demo I have for you at the end. Okay. This is what I want to show you, good ingress filtering. This is just the free open source version of Smoothwall, firewall. It's an older firewall that they have commercial now, but I still use the old one and put it on capture the flags all the time, and nobody really ever gets anywhere with it, right? So when you look at it here, this is incoming network traffic for the firewall. There's nothing. This is true ingress filtering. You have to put a rule in for it to be allowed. That's the way you want to do your networks. You only allow inbound what you need, and you identify that when you do your segment by segment evaluation and analysis of your architecture. Okay, the reality, everybody says you have no time, you have no staff, and you have no budget, right? Everybody out there is probably shaking their heads. And there's every excuse under the sun. When I chaired the Cyber Defense Summit in the Middle East, I did this same type of event, and I explained to them, I can show you how to do this in minutes. All right, so the quick win. This is your quick win, because I've already said all these different types of things. Ingress, egress, excellent. When you start doing that, you've done majority of the mitigations, but we know some users going to click. We can't stop the users from clicking. They're going to keep clicking forever unless somebody can patch them, but we can't patch the human yet. So what we do is we put an internal honeypot and decoys. All right, they're relatively low cost, decide the price of the hardware, or if you want to buy the commercial product, it's like $600, but I think it's even less than that today, like $495. Okay, so my first one is the commercial one. This is KF sensor. KF sensor has all these ports open and all these different types of things. So anything that's red means somebody hit that port. And not only did it hit it, you've got the visitor. So you have the IP address of the visitor. Remember, this is patient 0. All we're doing here is we're looking for the infected machine. Patient 0 is going to look around. When patient 0 looks around, we have the source address of patient 0. We isolate patient 0. Now, hopefully, we can do our reverse engineering, malware analysis, all that type of stuff once we isolate it, do our forensics, incident response. But in reality, a lot of times patient 0 dies. So in this case, you might just have to rebuild the box. It does happen. But we win if we prevent the spread. And the spread is patient 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those types of things. So I want you to understand that. Now, some of you out there are probably saying, well, yeah, but Kevin, look at all these ports that are open. As soon as a hacker sees that, they're going to know it's a honeypot. I don't care they know it's a honeypot. We're using it in the sense of a trigger. I just need one packet. One packet to this IP address in any of my monitors or my filters means I've got a infection on that segment, because this should never receive traffic. It's just there, nobody's published, nobody knows about it, and it should never receive an actual packet. Now, if you're saying, well, yeah, but it's a little bit too many ports, all that type of stuff, well, then free option number 1. My old tool, Back Officer Friendly. Nice little tool, not around anymore, but you can get it from archive.org. or find it other places too. It's free. It was created by Marcus Raynham when back orifice was really popular and those types of things. And all you do is you set it to listen. So if you want to listen for back orifice 31337, FTP, Telnet, SMTP, you get the idea. Also, I could just set it for one port. And if that one port's hit, it actually is going to do this. It's going to connect to it, and it's going to come up and tell me, look at this, all these connections requested, right? But look what happens when I try to telnet to the port that says it's open. It connects, but immediately it closes. And that's all I need. That's my trigger. With that trigger, I've got enough to go back and investigate and isolate the segment. Remember, isolate patient 0. My goal is to isolate the actual patient 0 from infecting patient 1, right? And this is your quick win scenario of how you can do this. Okay. Then La Brea tar pit. Anybody's been out Los Angeles? I live in Los Angeles. La Brea, the tar pit's here. Well, that's what the concept of the honeypot is. And it's kind of cool because it's on Linux, which is always nice. And it's kind of easy to set up. And I've actually got a video on it as well. So what I got here is I'm running it on my ETH0 interface, and I'm telling it to capture the entire subnet of 192.168.177.0. So what it does is it will go, and anytime anybody looks for an IP address, La Brea will come back and tell them that IP address is live. So by doing that, now we have the capability to see that IP address. So some of you listening out there might remember the introduction to hacking is live systems. So we find a live system. Well, what's the next step? We'll look for what's on the system, ports, the doors. So once I look for the port, so La Brea will actually start responding like this IP address is live, and then the next thing it do will put the actual port in a tar pit. So if you go to your second step of the scanning methodology and you try to connect to the port, it's going to give back tar, which is like 1-bit communication at a time back to the scanner. So by doing that, it catches it in the tar pit and really slows down the scanner. And then the scanner starts doing retransmissions and all those types of things. That's how the La Brea tar pit works, all right? So this is what I want you to understand. We can set these things up. Now again, remember, all it takes is one packet. So when I set up my rule set, any packet to the subnet 177 is suspicious. Investigate, because the source of that, more than more likely, is malware infected. Now, you always got to be careful and make sure it's not part of the Windows network, but on Linux, I'm pretty safe that nobody's going to talk to that Linux machine by IP address unless it specifically wants to talk to that machine. And if we haven't published any of these IP addresses anywhere in our architecture, the only people that could be doing this would be malicious and an infected computer actually doing this, okay? Okay, so let's do a demo. So we can do some demos here. So let me get my screen. Hopefully everybody can see that virtual machine. And I just set it up as a video here. So the first one here is KF sensor. So all I'm going to do is install it. And remember, this one's like the commercial option. I think it's $495. And then I'm just updating it. So pretty simple since we went through. These 3 demos, when I did this in the actual Cyber Defense Summit, I had them, I said, put on a stopwatch. I said, I'm going to finish and install 3 quick win solutions that I just talked about, and I'm going to do it in less than 10 minutes. So I actually do it, I think, in 6. And got to reboot the computer, but of course in video land I speed that up. So this will be the fastest reboot you ever seen of Windows. So there's the reboot. KF sensor is running. You see over here all these ports are actually available now on the network on this machine. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually scan it. And when I scan it, you're going to see that it alerts. It's already alerting here that it's getting work group Vulcus 3, so it's getting the visitors. So it's already got the visitors here. Remember, when we set these up as a decoy and trigger, that's all we need. Now we know right here now. You don't see anything?
No, just a blue screen.
Blue screen. Okay, so why'd that happen? Okay, let me see if I can fix that. So I'll play it again then. Do you see it now?
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Okay, sorry about that. What happened was I just did a conference, and then when I was presenting there, I actually had my presenter mode on, I think, and that's why we started off there rough. Apologize for that. So now, again, I mean, it's 6 minutes, so we're still got some time. And that's for all 3 of them. This is a pretty easy one to get. You can go get it. It's a commercial one for those you want commercial. Personally, I like the little back officer friendly, or you can use Labra Tar Pit. Or you can set one up on your own. A little script with Netcat will do the same thing. Remember, all we're doing is setting up a machine that should never receive internet traffic. Traffic, period. Okay, so here we go. So now it's set. All I've got to do now is connect to it. And remember, that's going to give it a critical alert. So that's the type of things we want to do. So all these ports are open. So now that I've got all these ports open, what happened? There we go. All the ports are open, but it's too late. The honeypot trigger should never receive traffic. So when it receives traffic, I know it's suspicious. Or I can say, you know what, I'm only going to look for port 80 traffic because I know 80 is always there. But look at that. There's a port scan. When I see all those ports like that in red, that tells me it's a port scan. And I just go to the visitor, and that's patient 0. So now I've identified the actual patient 0 machine. Okay, so that's that one. Next is back officer friendly. Same type of thing. It doesn't matter what box I set up because it's easy, it's a decoy, all right? So now, again, I'm gonna run it. It's gonna come up in evaluation mode because remember, it doesn't exist anymore. It was when Network Flight Recorder was still around. And I just listen to the network every time you start Windows, that's an option. And now what I do is with this one is I can set specific actual ports, which I kind of like because then you don't have to set all different ports and you can set it up. So now when it actually comes up, here it is, it's that little policeman. You got a little policeman down here in the tray. I'm going to open the policeman. That's back officer friendly. And I'm going to configure it. And when I configure it, I just click on options and there it is. I select what ones I want. So it's listen to the back FTP. I take off back orifice 31337, don't do that too much anymore. SMTP, and now I have these ports listening. So now if somebody comes out and looks for these ports because, let's face it, attackers are sometimes going to be stealthy and only look for like port 22, port this, and port that. So what I do is I do an nmap scan, even from Windows works. So there's just an nmap scan from Windows, right? So now when I go back over here, right there they are. See the connections? I've got it. It's game over. I've got the source of the infection. I've got patient 0. Again, this is how we need to do our networks today. And these are quick wins. This one's free. You actually can get it off the internet, right? So again, this is what I'm trying to get across here. We've got the segment by segment. I talked about the ingress, the egress. All these are powerful ways you can protect your network. And the last one here is my favorite, Labra. And I got to install it first. So even installing it, I still don't take that much time. So I just do apt-get install Labra, which every one of you can get actually set up and do out there on your own. And then I just, once it's installed, I just run it and run the command. And again, it's a pretty simple package to run and set up. And those of your Linux types out there already, you could set up a syslog rule that says if anything hits this, and you set with snort, you do anything they want to do, and you can actually go to a critical alert. Or in your perimeters or your monitors, just look for IP. So there's my Labra, and I'm actually going to start it. And there it is. And now I've got the actual honeypot set ready to go. Now all I have to do is look at a filter. If I get a filter that shows the actual connections to this, it's a honeypot, all right? So again, that's the setup. That's all I have to do. So now this box and all 3 of these machines are all set, ready to go, and can prevent or at least identify a malware infected machine. And all 3 of them, other than having to redo that one because you didn't see it, is in 6 minutes. So that's literally 6 minutes of time to set up 3 different types of decoys or triggers. So powerful stuff. And that brings me to question time. And then I'll put this up so everybody can look at it that wants to see some more references, information about me, and I think I'll turn it over to Paul to see if there's any questions. And thank you very much for listening. As I said earlier, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have problems setting them up. In my book, this one here, the 2nd edition, I actually go through in detail how to set these up and also use and test them and those types of things. So yeah, we're ready for questions now.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Excellent program once again. Please ask your questions in the chat box. Just makes it easier for everyone to see there, if at all possible. We'll open it up, for another few minutes, and hopefully, obviously, there's a lot of material covered here, and it's very detailed. And that's why I also recommend you go back and review this. And we might even start out the next time, although we'll see, and Kevin will be the arbiter of that, is if you have questions and you're not quite sure about them right now, we can always have you email them in or open that up in the beginning of next time. So we'll see. So if you're not really quite sure now, feel free to email them to helpdesk@starweaver.com. We'll make sure Kevin gets them. Obviously, his email's up here as well, but just for filtering purposes. Doesn't look like there are any questions offhand right now, Kevin, but again, an excellent program. It's all recorded. The quiz and assessment questions at the very end of the day will come from these types of presentations or these specific presentations. So again, before you do the assessment at the very end of the program, which will happen in a few weeks, we recommend you review the materials once again. Again, a lot of material to cover, not child's play. As I like to say, this is really the serious world of security that we're living in and the critical requirements. And I think that great program, great set of information, and great tools for you to use in the job. So does not look like we have any questions at the moment, Kevin. So I think with that, we'll wrap it up for the day. Appreciate everyone's time. Kevin, of course, we always appreciate your great presentations and detail and insight. But again, feel free to send in questions if you have, again, to the email here you see on the screen or to helpdesk@starweaver.com. Please fill out the survey at the end, again, on the link there, just because it makes us better at what we do, and we can do more for you in that way. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.